there was a commission meeting yesterday. I'm always very scared when I get these WhatsApp messages from the FIA saying, please see attached minutes from the commission meeting, FIA decisions taken. I think, oh no, what are they doing to our sport next? And actually, most of them, I mean, not too bad. I'll go through them in true Bernie style, right at the end of the thing. The most important one, by the time you're sort of half full and half asleep. Furthermore, with the aim of promoting better racing at Monaco, and they say that as if everybody wants better racing at Monaco. I've never wanted better racing at Monaco because I've never expected any racing at Monaco in the first place. It's all about qualifying, and then it's all about not hitting anything in the race, and obviously controlling the race at your own pace. And that's what we all expect of the Monaco Grand Prix. It's not a race. We've known that since the 60s. All it is a huge event brought to us effectively by Grace Kelly, who later became Princess Grace. It's just a massive event, but it's never been a real racetrack on which you can overtake back in the 60s. So got to have better racing. Well, as I say, I personally never go to Monaco expecting the racing to be good. So why do we want better racing? I think that premise is wrong in the first place. The Commission has discussed proposals for Monaco's specific regulations. And this is when you start to think, oh no, what are they going to do? The Commission agreed to increase the number of mandatory pit stops in the race. Well, I'm confused by that as well, because I don't think the rule, I may be wrong, but I don't think the rule says that you must make one mandatory pit stop now. What it says is you have to use 2 different compounds of dry weather tires. And so I think there's a confusion there. And I make that point because if it's a wet race, you don't have to make any pit stops at all. So there is no mandatory pit stop. And therefore, anything they're going to do now, and the proposals will be further discussed. In other words, they want to have 2 or 3 mandatory pit stops. But does that apply to the wet as well, for example, just as one point? But much more importantly, going back to my previous point, which is that it's not a mandatory pit stop. It's having to use 2 different types of dry compound tire. If you then say, okay, you've got to have at least 2 pit stops. You've got to use 2 different compounds, or you've got to have 2 different compounds, but 2 mandatory pit stops, however they want to phrase it. They are going to the soft underbelly of the Monaco Grand Prix, which is the pit lane, which is without doubt the most congested and therefore the most dangerous pit lane in the Grand Prix calendar. There's very little room for the mechanics to operate, particularly if all the cars are coming in at the same time. And it's a very, very tough weekend for the mechanics as well. So what this is basically saying is that, oh, we've got to have better racing. We can't have overtaking, so we can only do that in the pit lane. So we'll just have more pit stops, and the mechanics can live with all that. And if you have some shunts in the pit lane, I suppose that's good for TV. I guess that's what they're saying, sort of. Because I can't think of a circuit less conducive to having more pit stops rather than fewer than Monaco. Tiny pit lane, they've got a slower speed limit because of that, and it's a mess. It's always a mess at Monaco in the pit lane, and they want to have more of that. I think, you know, and I go back to my further point. They're saying we've got to have better racing at Monaco. What does that mean? Does that mean that after Charles Leclerc won the Monaco Grand Prix, won his home Grand Prix, and was standing there on the podium listening to that Monegasque anthem, and the crowd were 2-1 were either cheering or in tears from the emotion of the event? What are they saying? That actually that's not really what happened. Everybody was shouting and moaning and screaming, saying, what a terrible race. We've got to have a better race, a much better race. You know, I just don't get it. And this again comes down to this whole thing about surveys and asking the fans what they want. And yeah, of course, everybody wants a bit more overtaking if you can do it without affecting other things. But Monaco is Monaco. You're never going to have great overtaking at Monaco. Think about 1965, a long time ago now. Graham Hill's greatest Grand Prix win happened because in trying to lap a back marker, he went off at the chicane, went up the escape road, got back into the race, and then won the Grand Prix. But it was a back marker that took him off because it's so difficult to overtake at Monaco. That was 1965 in tiny little 1.5 litre Formula One cars. Think about 1992, when everybody says, oh, brilliant win by Ayrton Senna, broke the domination of Nigel Mansell and Williams Renault in the 14B Senna at his best around Monaco? Well, the last 4 laps, from my memory, and I was in the Williams pit, was that Ayrton was doing nothing but holding up Nigel, doing it well, it's not difficult to do around Monaco. Nigel was much quicker, should have won that Grand Prix. Couldn't get past because Ayrton was in front, nowhere to overtake. And yet everybody said, what a great Grand Prix, brilliant win by Ayrton Senna. You know, it's how you perceive things. And okay, bottom line, how would Windsor improve things at Monaco? I would just say improve the show by having more access than ever to the technology, the radios, and what's going on with the cars and with the teams and with the drivers. And I've floated the idea several times on live streams that we actually allow communication between the drivers in real time during the race, and just for that one race. It's Monaco specific. Let's have the drivers talking to one another on the radio. Wouldn't that liven things up without having to have an extra pit stop? And as I say, this whole thing about a mandatory pit stop is, to me, it's a weird thing, because of course it's mandatory if it's dry, but it's not mandatory if it's wet. And it's not mandatory anyway, actually, because at the moment you can go out on what is basically the formation lap, come in on your yellow tyres, switch to white tyres, and start the race effectively at the back of the field then, obviously. And there's your pit stop. So that's not a pit stop in the sense of what they're talking about here in the middle of the race to break it all up. So there's a lot of there that I find quite confusing and a bit annoying, really.